what he wants to do and what his concerns are. So can we table this to next meeting?
Well, there's a real problem that they're trying to get both signs made at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at town council last Thursday night to talk about it. And there's real cost efficiency in doing them both together.
Thomas has expressed his concern.
Right.
His concern is having a town sign outside of the town. I understand that, and but you do see it in other places.
Where?
And you go down to North Carolina.
I moved the sign that was on.
I'm saying,
Milford Street,
I think it's
outside
important that
the
we
town.
work with the town. And if the town wants to put a sign, as
Oh
long
my
as you agree
God.
not to annex the area that you put the sign
Let me
in,
move before the lightning
then
hits us.
That's another story. But I have no
Let me
problem
move before the
in
lightning
working
hits
with
us.
them and saying,
We'll
hey,
do it
put a
after the
sign.
break. Can we take a break right now, and then we'll come back
I don't
and
care
address
what we
it?
do.
All right.
I'm just saying we need to do it.
All right, we'll take a 15-minute break.
15 minutes. Supervisor.
We'll be back.
Mr. Chairman, may I, if I could make an announcement to the audience. After the Board of Supervisors completes its break, we will move into public comment at some point. Anyone who wants to speak at public comment, I would ask that you keep your topics to anything that is not related to the budget, because then the public hearing on the budget will follow public comment, and we would ask you to speak at that time on the proposed budget, in which I would ask that you come up and sign up if you choose to speak on the budget this evening. We have a sign-up sheet right there at the press table, and we would ask during the 15-minute break if you would sign up for that. You don't need to sign up if you're doing under public comment, but you do need to sign up if you're going to speak on the proposed budget. Thank you.
Mr. Wright, do you need to close your meeting? Y'all did already? Okay. All right. Board will take a 15-minute recess.
Come back to the agenda.
Board is now back in session, and we did leave at the topic discussing the town of Bowling Green's sign for property outside the town limits.
Mr. Chairman, after much discussion with the town manager, Mr. Manster, and his excellent elocution, he has convinced me that it would be in the county's best interest to allow the sign for the town of Bowling Green outside of the town of Bowling Green this one time.
Is that a motion, Mr. Thomas?
As much as I hate to say it, it is.
I'll second that.
All right. Motion made and probably second. Board members ready to proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen. All right. At this time, we'll move into the public comment section. Now, this section is not the public hearing, which some folks may have signed up for. So anything related to the budget should be done during the public hearing. But now is public comment. And if there are any citizens who would like to address the board on these matters, can come forward and do so. But before that, Mrs. Hall will read our rules.
The public comment period shall be for the purpose of allowing the public to speak to the board on any matter which is not scheduled for public hearing at this meeting. To help conduct the meeting in an orderly and efficient manner, please refrain from clapping or other public demonstrations of support or opposition. The public comment period shall not serve as a forum for debate with the board or a question and answer period with the board. Remarks shall be addressed only to the board and not to staff, the audience, or the media. All public comments shall be made in a respectful manner. Cursing and antagonistic behavior are prohibited and shall be grounds for removal from the meeting. Comments should focus on matters or issues before the board or county and not individual board members or staff. Comments which single out an individual board member or staff may be ruled out of order by the chair. Each speaker shall clearly state his or her name, address, and voting district, if applicable. There shall be a time limit for each individual speaker of 3 minutes. No speaker shall address the board more than once during the public comment period at any single board meeting. County administrator will time the speakers and notify them when their time has expired. Copies of the detailed rules are located on the back table.
All right, and at this time, if there are any citizens who would like to address the board on any matter other than what's on the public hearing tonight for budget public hearing, if you'd like to speak come forth and state your name and voting district, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is George Spaulding. I'm a resident of the Bowling Green District, and I think I know most of you gentlemen. You know me. And I have to be careful because what I was going to say was going to be about the budget, but I'll just kind of skip around it, and you can read in between the lines. Is that fair enough? Okay.
Proceed cautiously.
I read all 3 articles that was in last week's paper. And of course, I've talked to a lot of people and all. Well, first of all, I've been a resident of the county for 39 years. I'm not going to give you my history and so forth and all. And when I came here, the school system was not that good. We had a poor reputation. And no matter where you went, they would say you couldn't do this, you didn't have this, and so on. And that 39 years has come a long ways, believe me, a long ways. And you gentlemen had a lot to do with that, with your finances and so on. Right now, the way the situation is, and I know how the economics are right now, they're tough all around. But that goes back a few years ago when a gentleman by the name of Governor Gilmore decided to take his car tax off. And I remember talking to Bill Bowling one time. I said, how are we going to offset that? He said, well, we're working on it. They must still be working on it because you haven't gotten any money from it yet. But anyway, what I really wanted to say was our school system has come a long ways. We used to lose good teachers because of pay and because of the health insurance. Every time they would get a raise, the health insurance would go up and would offset the raise and all. But now, the way we have it set up where the school board is paying a part of their salary and so on, when they get their raise, they can see it. But now, if we step back to that, then it's going to be back to the same old thing again. And we've lost some good teachers in the past because of that. Teachers that we didn't want to lose and teachers that didn't want to go, but they had to go because of their health insurance. But anyway, our kids, we have a lot of programs. We have about a fourth of our student population at the high school are in extracurricular activities, a fourth out of say 1,100 roughly. That's a lot. That's a lot. And I'm just pass this on you for food for thought. We have a lot of programs that I would hate to see go back. I think if you gentlemen have our kids, you know, sometimes we have to bite the bullet. The way it turns out, our kids are always biting the bullet. And the only thing I'd like to say is work hard, and I know you will, and see if we can't take care of business like we should. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Spaulding. Any other citizens who would like to address the board on any matter, just come forward and state your name and voting district.
Hello, gentlemen. My name is Chris Hall. Currently registered in the Mattaponi district, but just recently moved to Caroline Pines, so I'll be changing my voter information soon. The reason I'm here is to express my support for the proposed water project for Caroline Pines. The reason I'm doing so, I moved into Caroline Pines, specifically North Anna Drive, in November of 2009. At that point, I've discovered that I've had an ongoing issue at my home with my water being anywhere from a light yellow in color to a very dark brown. So far, this water has ruined several clothing items. It has completely stopped up a pure filter that has gone into my kitchen faucet. We put that on sometime shortly after Christmas, and shortly after New Year's, it stopped working completely because of all the dirt and grime that's collected inside of it. Also, I'm concerned about the water that we currently have in Caroline Pines because I recently got married, and we are expecting our first child any day now, well, in the beginning of April, excuse me. And I'm just concerned about bathing my child, preparing food for my child, that we're using this dirty water. Also, if it pleases members of the board, I do have pictures, and there's enough copies here of these photos were taken this past Sunday at my home. One is of a bath towel I used to dry myself off after a shower. The second is the shower itself and the water residue that's left on the bath, and the third is my washing machine. And they show what the quality of the water we currently are dealing with in Caroline Pines, and I'm not really sure who I would put it over there.
You can distribute them to the board if you like, Mr. Parton.
And just to continue on, you know, at this point in time, I just feel that as a husband and soon-to-be father, I just feel that this county water project is the best way for me. Speaking about this county water project is the best way for me to look after and take care of my family. At this time, I would like to thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me the time to speak to you. I know you have many other issues on your plates right now, and I'm just very grateful for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Are there any other citizens who would like to address the board?
Good evening,
Colonel.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. Percy? Let me read a little bit here and get me going here. You can start your time. I'll meet it with within 3 minutes, okay? As the Army is committed to providing training resources to the nation's sons and daughters in uniform with minimal disruption to our neighbors, we try to achieve this balance, and thus we have heard the community's concerns regarding the proposed relocation of the Army's EOD school to Fort A.P. Hill, and we have implemented numerous mitigation measures in response to those concerns. As you know, we extended the public comment period significantly on the proposed action to 5 times what is required by law to ensure that we gathered as much public input as possible. That ability to get folks talking is a win to the Army, and we are able to hear the concerns of our true citizens. As elected officials and citizens requested the benefit of a noise study using empirical versus model data, we worked with the U.S. Army Public Health Command, noise experts, and the EOD school to design a test that would best replicate these mitigated solutions to potential EOD noise. Finalized yesterday, and for the board's consideration, which we just distributed, there are the results from that operational noise study that we conducted from 4 February to 12 February. The report includes a total of 1,386 events recorded at 8 monitoring sites that were located in Port Royal, Portabago Bay, and Essex County. The study concludes the predicted levels are lower than what were presented in the previous National Environmental Policy Act documents. In addition, we have moved larger ranges away from Portabago Bay. We have reduced the size of charges, the times of those detonations, and the frequency of those charges. Now, not even broached yet until this evening, although I talked with several members of the Board of Supervisors this weekend about the issue, there are numerous revenues associated with the stationing of the EOD school at Fort A.P. Hill. Beyond the substantial construction contracts associated with the building of the training facilities, 2 contractors of which live in Port Royal right now, the region surrounding Fort A.P. Hill can expect benefits from both new full-time jobs and military personnel traveling in a temporary duty status to attend courses at the installation. As operations associated with the EOD school and the Warrior Field Training Exercise reach full capacity, nearly 140 new full-time military, civilian, and contractor positions representing an initial payroll of $3.55 million are anticipated. Additionally, non-commissioned officers on temporary duty assignment orders drawing per diem for the duration of their visit at Fort A.P. Hill will represent a total of 25,510 bed nights for lodging on the local economy, or a total of $2.83 million in per diem. These are base numbers, absent any multiplier effect calculation, so they do not reflect the total economic impact. These actual economic impacts are based on Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and it's expected to be double or triple what I just listed. Now, as you know, there are largely 2 concerns. These are both the mitigating steps being buried very low and very complicated environmental documents. Number 2 is the fear that once the AEOD school comes, that will be a foot in the door and a reason to increase their activities at a later time. To this end, suggested by Nancy Long to me last week in a meeting, I am proposing that we try to collaborate at a small level to bring forward some sort of understanding to codify those mitigation steps, outline the Army's responsibilities in the process, what we can and can't do, and the community's responsibilities in that process as well. We think that's a win-win proposition where the citizens' needs are heard and met, where the Army is not constrained in their future actions, and where we can codify these actions in the future to sort of allay concerns for the citizens that we won't scope this at a later time. So in closing, I express my sincere gratitude to the citizens of Caroline County, Essex County, Port Royal, and Portabago Bay that assisted us in both this most recent noise study and throughout this whole entire process. Thank you very much.
Okay, Lieutenant Colonel, and what I may do, if the board will allow, is we'll go right into the item referring to AP Hill right after the citizen comment. Okay?
Thank you very much.
That'd be the very next thing we'll take up.
Colonel, could you stay close in case there's a question?
I'm sorry, pardon me, sir?
Would you please stay close in case there's a question?
Oh, sure. I won't go far.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, that's
Are there any other citizens who would like to address the board at this time? State your name and voting district, please.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Jim Day. I know all of you. I'm from the Bowling Green voting district. I'm the Bowling Green representative to the Military Affairs Council, which is the committee that the Chamber of Commerce, the Regional Chamber of Commerce, has to support the facilities like AP Hill. I was shocked when I saw the resolution that is on your agenda tonight, and I want to ask you that that at best be tabled, because there are quite a few inaccuracies in there. Some of the facts that Colonel Hafner just shared with you are very important. I think I don't need to remind you that our nation is at war. Thankfully, it's not here, it's somewhere else. But I spent a long time in the military, and I know many of you did also. Training is extremely important to the survival of our young men and women that serve in the military. Like the kamikaze planes in World War II, the proliferation of these improvised explosive devices in Iraq and Afghanistan were not something that we expected. And it's a very difficult training scheme to train troops both to disarm those and to adequately survive when you're in that environment. I just happened to have lunch today at a Thai restaurant in Bowling Green. I picked up a copy of the Washington Post, and I noticed, Washington Post is not my favorite newspaper, but I noticed that there were some photographs in there of recent combat deaths, recent deaths in the combat area. I didn't read the article, but I looked at the photographs and I read the cause of death, and I read the background of these servicemen and women. They were from all services: Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force. There were some in the combat arms, i.e. infantrymen and women, but there were very many in logistics fields, people that are taking supplies. The proliferation of these IEDs demands that we train troops to combat that threat. One thing I did like in your resolution, you mentioned that we're in the middle of a vast eastern area from New York down to Tidewater, where there are quite a few people. And that makes this type of training easily offered at a post like AP Hill. I think the resolution should be tabled, and I urge you to give thought, serious thought, to some of the items that Colonel Hafner pointed out in his remarks, and I'll stay around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Are there any other citizens who would like to address the board? on any matter other than for the public hearing on the budget. State your name and your voting district. If anybody else wants to speak, please line up. That would help us move along. Thank you.
Thank you, sirs. And my name is Cleo Coleman, and I live in the town of Port Royal. And I certainly did not come here with the intention of addressing this august body. But because the topic at hand touches my heart and my spirit so keenly, I feel I must. There's no one in this county, I believe, Brother Jim, who is against the military. My husband, both of my sons and uncles and so forth have served in there. There's no one who's against training. So those, as far as I'm concerned, are not items to make us rush to grasp this. There are 71,000 acres in AP Hill. And I have been caused, and my family and generations before me have been caused to move out of our homeland because of our understanding of and our love for our country. Now, I am almost 80 years old now, and I don't propose now to leave because the Army wants to train 5 miles from my home. There are 71,000 acres. Surely they can find someplace else in there to do what they need to do. I'm not against that, but I am very much against, and I have not seen your resolution, by the way. I'm hoping that it speaks to upholding the citizens of Port Royal and Porter-Bago Bay. Let that training be done someplace else and not on our front steps. I moved once and I'm too old to move again. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Are there any other citizens who would like to address the board on any matter? Are there any other citizens who would like to address the board on any matters? Come forward and state your name and voting district.
I'm going to speak on AP Hill.
Okay.
My name is Al Collins. I'm from Caroline County. Grew up here. Lived in a house down near Sparta, southern edge of AP Hill. Have heard firing there since I was a kid. The house is quite old, built in before 1900. I've never seen a window pane fall out, never seen anything crack. I've heard that. I'm also retired military, 22 years, 2 years in Vietnam. I know what the sound of incoming rockets and mortars are, incoming small arms fire. I call this the sound of freedom. I know it's controlled. I know it's being used to train our young troops, our policemen, and Homeland Security to defend our nation. That noise wakes me up at night sometimes, a little tremor. But I built my own house 25 years ago when I retired, and I've never yet had a problem with anything in that house. I say, folks, that is the sound of freedom. It's what we need. It's one of the best training areas in the United States, and it gives the Army what we need to train active duty, Marine Corps, Navy, Army, Air Force even comes here, reserve components. It keeps us free. And I'd much rather be free than to hear that noise and think it's a terrorist exploding something on our territory or an incoming round. And I'm here to say we need that at AP Hill, and it's worth a little bit of sacrifice. Thank you very much.
All right, any other citizens who would like to address the board on any topic other than the public hearing? Any other citizens who would like to address the board? Or any citizens who would like to address the board on any other topic? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment section. And next, the board has agreed, and we'll proceed to look at some unfinished business before we have a public hearing, where we did have the consideration of the resolution opposing the explosive ordnance disposal field, EOD field training facility as proposed at Fort AP Hill. And I think, board members, we have before us the proposed resolution. We heard some comments from Lieutenant Colonel Hafner tonight that probably even addressed some of those items. Board comments. Mr. Popovich, we're going to start at your end.
Sure. I was glad to hear what Colonel Hafner had to say tonight, because that means that we're moving in a new direction than we have before. But I would ask and urge the board to look at this resolution, because there's some things in here that I think are pertinent. We talk about the economic impacts to the area. We talk about the noise impacts to the area. And we also talk a little bit about the study that went on earlier. It was done in snow-covered areas where there is, even by their own admission in other studies, that does muffle the sounds. From my own standpoint, I did hear some of the explosive ordinances all the way in Woodford going off at my house when they were doing the training, and I know that they were going off during that time because I received an email saying they were doing that right when I felt the shock of these things. Can't imagine being a mile from that. It's not that not one person here doesn't support the military. AP Hill, the training that goes on there. I had a great-grandfather that had shrapnel in his body where he was in World War I. My other grandfather served in North Africa. I had a grandfather that was a command sergeant major in the military, served 27 years. My father served during the Vietnam era. It's an E5 before he got out. So I am from a military family. I may not have served myself, but I am from a military family, and we have always supported the military. Unfortunately, I don't believe that AP Hill and DOD took the time to talk to the citizens early on about this process, what would be there, and only recently have they come to the table to say, hey, we're willing to talk now. I don't do these types of things lightly. I don't go against the military lightly because it's near and dear to my heart, and I know that the men and women out there are sacrificing a ton for my freedom, so I can stand up here and talk about this tonight. But the fact of the matter is that the types of things that are supposed to be done during this process weren't done. They just weren't done. We, as representatives of Caroline County, have an obligation to point that out to the military and ask questions. And that's what this resolution does. It asks the questions, the hard questions, that we haven't gotten the answers to. I was informed of a meeting about the training less than 24 hours before the meeting was held. I couldn't even go. I had a business meeting I had to attend. Couldn't even go represent the people in my district on this subject when they started the training. That is not cooperation. That is not working together. And that's what we're really asking for, is to work together, to try to find a better solution. Not just you're being told what we're going to do. I found it offensive that I was treated that way. And you should find it offensive too. We all support the military here in Caroline County and AP Hill. I don't think there's anybody here that doesn't. And I think that it's time that EP Hill supports Caroline County. We want answers. That's all we're asking for in this resolution. And I think that if the other board members will agree with that, that we go forward with it. It's about 4 pages, if I remember, about 3 pages. And it asks some very poignant questions, and I think that need to be answered by the DOD folks. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Popovich. Ms. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, and I don't want anyone in this room to think that my comments are any indication of my not supporting the people of Porter Bay or the town of Port Royal, because I certainly support them. I stand with them in many issues. However, I'm not convinced that this resolution is in the best interest of the people of Porter Bay, or the people of Port Royal, or the people of Caroline County, or the county relations between, or the relationships between Caroline County and the military. The way it is worded here, I'm just not sure that it's in the best benefit. I have always felt that if we can talk to each other face to face, work with each other, we get much more accomplished than we do by passing these resolutions, because it can be misread and misinterpreted by different people. So I have a concern. The other issue, we've talked about military training and what have you, and I've really not said much about this and made a point of it, but my wife, nephew, was killed back in May, I believe it was, in Afghanistan, and he was in a unit that detonated bombs before the other convoys went by. And unfortunately, he didn't detonate it quick enough. He was killed. He was a young man that was he was the first person that was televised. Their homecoming was televised on TV. President Obama allowed that to happen, and he was the first one to come home. So I think it's important that we support these issues and we try to work and do everything we can to save lives wherever we can. This young man had 2 young children, one child that was 1 year old and one child that was 4 years old. They'll not grow up to know their father in any way, in any sense. And, you know, during this whole process, it's been, a lot of things have been said to bear on the emotions of each other. And I don't know if that's beneficial for any of us. What I would like to see happen is I would like to see the Lieutenant Colonel arrange a meeting with someone within the Department of Army in Washington to come down and sit face to face with the people in Portabago Bay and Port Royal that are being impacted, and listen to what they have to say, and maybe go back and work at trying to correct some of the slightness that we've seen, or the people in Caroline County have seen during this process. But I'm not convinced that a resolution worded the way it's worded is going to accomplish that. I was told, and this always comes back to me when I see things such as this, many years ago when Pumasin Jail was being proposed for Caroline County, the Board of Supervisors at that time, we got up in arms and we absolutely opposed it, and we did everything we could to stop it. We sent resolutions to everybody that we had an email address to, or we had a mailing address for, hoping that something would be accomplished. A couple of us went to Washington and we met with John Warner, which was the individual that spearheaded this process. And he said to me something I've kept with me. He said, listen, this is going to happen. I'm going to make sure that Northern Virginia gets land at AP Hill to put a regional jail. My suggestion to you is try to start working with those people and try to compromise with those people, whereas it can be the best proposition for Caroline County and not go against them constantly. That's what I'd like to see happen here. I don't think any of the resolutions we send is going to change the Army's mind as to putting the school in Caroline County. Ms. Coleman, I'd like to see the site changed, and I think that's something that maybe they could work in and try to work with, and I'd like to see the Lieutenant Colonel and the Army to work along those lines. But if we think we're going to stop this training school coming to Caroline County, we probably need to take another thought, because I don't think that's going to happen. And I'm not sure this resolution addressed any of the issues and concerns that I believe that the people of Portabago Bay have, or the people of Port Royal have, or the people of Caroline County have. So that's my thoughts, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Seeley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go back to our second meeting in January, Mr. Akers, where you suggested, and I applauded, that we have a meeting with Fort AP Hill. We limited by letter who would attend and who would be allowed to speak and what we would actually allow to happen. And I thought that was a great resolution at the time, and probably could have headed off a lot of emotion that has taken place. We were never able to sync upon a date, and here we are in the first week in March, and we're no closer to that meeting than we are. Colonel Hefner said something interesting, and I'd like to ask him if he could answer this, and it's along the lines of you of negotiating a meeting. Colonel, can you tell me who from the Army would come down and actually, and I'm saying scope this meeting so that we can actually accomplish something, because I do believe we've made some headway, but I don't think that we have a lot of time, and I know the Army has to make a decision. So who would come down in the command structure that could sit down and make decisions to talk to a number of folks that could actually facilitate that?
I think at our level, to do something like we talked about, a memorandum of understanding. One, we can do that with a limited number of folks that are already here. Probably at your recommendation of the board. Somebody from AP Hill, because I got to run it. Somebody from Fort Lee, because they kind of own a portion of it. Elected officials in there, a small amount, but I think it needs to hold the weight, and I think it will hold the weight of the senior commander, a 2-star general on there.
But I think he needs to come see us, because I've rewatched the video twice that was taken January 7th. There were a lot of things said. And I think that we're to the point that you all have to make a decision, and we need somebody in the leadership role who can sit down and make a decision in for Caroline County. And I understand your role as the commander, but you need somebody in your command structure down here that can listen and negotiate, because I think that's the only fair thing to everybody, because we've had a whole lot of dialogue back and forth. And it's like tonight, we get to speak, you get to listen. When you guys answer the questions, it's going to be you get to speak, we get to listen. And there's never been dialogue. And we need somebody in the command structure who can make decisions, that can have dialogue with those of us that are here that have to answer to everybody in this room. And tonight, I understand Jim Day's comments, I understand Al Collins' comments, but I sat through the January 7th meeting, and I've sat through 100 phone calls at my house and dozens of emails to everybody that's impacted. And I think that we need to do this in a very short time frame. And I think the only thing about I don't have any reservation about the resolution, but I do think that it's a bargaining tool that we all need to sit down, knowing that, at least from my perspective, that we haven't been in the loop other than the January 7th meeting. And again, that was us telling the structure of the Army what we thought, and you're going to come back later and tell us answers to what you thought. And I think before that happens, if we can negotiate something, I'm for that. But it needs to happen in the next 7 days, 10 days. Because I think once we lose that window, we lose any ability for the Army to make any sort of movement in what's going on, because things are going to go forward. I'm not opposed to negotiating, but I do believe we need dialogue, and we believe that we need somebody up your chain of command to have it with all of us so that we're all on the same page.
Well, and I agree with you. And I think that what we did on January 7th is we brought forward hundreds of comments, okay, of which only a very select few were germane to the proposal, okay? Right now, the proposal is to move the heavy demolitions farther away from Portabago Bay. That's what was on the table, okay? And the Army has done a bunch of things to mitigate that, but I don't think, even though we write articles or we talk to people, what the Army has made concessions on, which meets our needs and meets community needs, is still not being understood.
That's why I think your leadership and some folks that are in leadership roles in the county need to be in one room.
But I don't think there's something further to arbitrate. I mean, we can talk and educate and communicate and get the points across on either side, but the Army has gone through extraordinary measures so far.
I guess what I'm saying to you is we're still talking past each other tonight, because there is a tremendous amount of I don't understand, the Army doesn't understand, and I think that's why the leadership needs to be in the room with some of us so that we're all on the same page when we're done, because we're not. And that's been the problem. And when you look at some of those public comments that were made at Port Royal, and I've stopped them, rewound them, looked at them, listened to them very carefully. And I know you don't agree with some of the things that are in here, but when you look at the questions that were asked by those folks, be it emotional, be it subjective, this is what it boils down to. I mean, this is truly what they're fearful of, and this is truly what they believe. We're only trying to transmit to you in writing what the true perception becomes reality. This is what's perceived. We're trying to give you what we're hearing day after day, telephones, go-eated horns, what I hear when I see folks in Port Royal, Portabago Bay. This is truly what they believe, and even though you don't agree, it is what they think, it's what they believe, and it's what we have to resolve as the Army and as the local governing body. I'm just trying to be fair to everybody in the process. That's why I think your leadership, some leadership from this board, some leadership from the Port Royal Town Council, some leadership from Portabago Bay can iron this out so that everybody, I'm just trying to make this a smooth, easy process that everybody understands, so we're not talking past each other. We're not talking to you. You're not on the other side talking to us. We're not talking to each other because it's too hard. Those are truly my comments, and I'd like to see us in less than 10 days have that meeting, like next week, Tuesday, Wednesday.
See, I think we can meet, but I don't know if we want to put preconditions on exactly the person that needs to be there. Because if we do that, you know, the way I have to schedule two-star general schedules, it ain't going to happen.
Well, I have it
It's
on,
like aligning planets.
I have it on pretty good authority that they would probably do it. And I'm just telling you what I've been told. And we can run it up the chain and see what happens. I'm for mitigating these issues, but I'm for mitigating them with everybody that's been a decision maker from what's been claimed to be the beginning, or who was in those positions when it began, because they're not there anymore. So we've lost corporate knowledge. But that's where I'd like to see us go very quickly.
Okay, Mr. Seeley. Mr. Thomas.
I'll stay right here, Mr. Thomas.
I wanted to ask you how we codify our actions in the future, which is, because I know the Caroline County versus the United States Army, there's no competition. So, I mean, what are you saying when you say we're going to codify your actions? Are we going to make some sort of legislation on the federal level that says this is what happens and this is the way it's supposed to happen? Is that what you meant?
Well, required in the environmental documentation, which is out there right now, the supplementary environmental assessment, okay? One looks at that and it gets studied, and then one says, well, if we want there to be no significant impact, that's what we're trying to get to,
right,
these conditions must be met.
Okay.
Okay? So it's in there, and it's going to go in there, and it's going to be documented. And the only way to change that in the future is to go through another environmental process all over again. But going back to October of 2006, when the environmental impact statement was done by Fort Lee, and members of Caroline County and Port Royal and Bowling Green were down at the Reserve Center, okay? Those are hard documents to read, especially if you don't know what you're reading. And then again, it's hard to read, okay? So what we don't want is it to be buried in this, and it's just difficult for people to access. We want to bring that forward. We want to be clear what the Army has done and what we expect of ourselves and what the community expects of us if we would ever have to change it. Okay, so it's not a sleight of hand. There's not a understand that we're going to have a foot in the door and increase the poundages tomorrow on this thing. Right. We want that to be very open and accessible to the public.
And that's kind of what we talked about. The colonel called me this weekend. I think it was this weekend,
yes,
right, or last weekend?
Yes, sir.
It was a weekend. And, you know, we did talk, and again, Colonel, like I said then, I've got the greatest respect for the United States Army. It's the world's greatest army. I'm not, with all due respect, I'm not quite as old as Mr. Day, Mr. Collins, but I did have a draft card back in the good old days when they could take anybody. So you really get a sense of respect when they can just pick anybody. So I want you to understand that me personally, I'm a supporter of the Army training. I don't think you'll find anybody who doesn't say that. But as what we talked about this weekend, it's really we just need to move the the explosions a little closer to the center of AP Hill. And I think